אתה כאן. אוקיי, אתה קיבלת את המצגת שלי כבר כאן. כן?
כן. נכון? זה.
מרטנס, כן. כן, כן, נכון.
הראשון?
כן, בסדר. בסדר גמור.
Okay, how is calling the slide?
Something like
Slide Jerusalem fig?
Yes.
Yeah. How it says?
Let's say yes.
Okay.
Thank you. אז הכל בסדר? שלום, שלום. הכל בסדר? זה.
שנייה, רגע, יש לי שאלה. אני מכבה את המצלמה, אין לי בעיה? שידור? לא, זה אתה מזיר את המצלמה. מכבה מצלמה? לא מכבה מצלמה, מכבה מקרן, ולא מכבה. אז אני רוצה לשנות כבר את התוכנה. קראתי לך, אתה מוכר פריים, שלא יש לו מלא? זה אותו פאנל, זה אותו... כן, זה לוקח ומדליקים את האורות. מדליקים את האורות. ואז אתה מעביר את המצלמה, ואז את המצלמה אתה מעביר לחוק. לא צריך. כן, בלוח כן, ואז אתה עוקב אחריו. ואז כולם רואים את המצלמה על הלוח. ואז הם רואים את המצלמה, אלה שמשקיעים פה ואלה שמשקיעים פה. אתה מכוון עם המצלמה על... אתה מבין? אתה תצטרך... אתה הכנת סלייד? אתה הולך לעבוד עם הלוח? אנחנו מחזינים אותם, מה אין את המחשב עם פה? אתה לא הבאת לי מחשב. עכשיו תבין, אני גם מחשב. בן אדם מפנים מחשב שלוקח חודשיים להביא אותו. כי עדיין אני אבטיח. סתם אני בקי. אתה חושב שאני אעשה את המחשב של סר. תבין? במבחן של תפקיד ישם גדול. אני תמיד אמרתי לו שתביא את זה. וזה אומר שאני תשמע לשם. זה כמה שעות. יש לה קשה. אני לא עשיתי את זה. אני לא... כן, 8-1. אני כזה... שים את זה עליו. אני אשב ונכנס. טוב, יאללה. אני אחזיר את הזה. טוב. הלחיצות פה על הפנים שתדע. כן, עד שתגיד זה עכשיו זה זמן להגיד. רגע, מה עשיתי? מה לחצתי? איך אני יכול להחזיר? איך אני מחזיר מסך? HDMI? לא. זה ככה. למדת? למדת? כן מזה. זה אמרתי? כן, זה הלאה, אני רואה שזה הלאה. מיזוג מה? גדול? תגיד לי, אתה נורמלי? לא יודע לעשות כלום. יש שלושה פונקציות, on, off, on, או off, on, off.
אוקיי, תודה רבה.
אוקיי, עכשיו...
אוקיי, עכשיו...
אתה מדבר את זה עכשיו?
כן, בסדר.
שאני שם לך את זה.
בסדר, זה חדר.
לא, זה העניין שלך דקה, זה בשידור ישיר.
מה? שידור ישיר לאן?
לקול.
אוקיי. Let's go.
Let's go.
אם אתם תעלו את זה, הוא לא רוצה להיות על כל הרגע. אתם תעלו את זה, נכון?
אנחנו אחרי זה נעלה, כן. You can talk. You are opening the זה? פותח את הסשן?
כן.
תפעילי פה את המזגן? אתה יכול להפעיל חם פה.
אפשר להתחיל? אתה מוכן? ישראל, אתה מוכן?
כן, כן, אני אתחיל. לא צריך, חבל על הזמן.
Welcome to all. The chairman of this session is Professor Sergio Art. Please start off.
Maybe we can turn out the lights. We have enough light from the window here. Let's turn out the light.
Wait, don't I have to tell who you are? I mean,
You know, let me tell you a story. I'll start with a story, okay?
okay,
Okay.
that's what you have.
Yeah, okay. So I'd like to.
You are going to be delighted by the talk.
First of all, okay. First of all, I'd like to say that I had a sort of a. It's not a deja vu, but a sort of a senior moment last night, in which I said, "Oh well, there's this conference tomorrow. I'm going to see Jean-François tomorrow." So, and then I caught myself, yeah, but in a sense, I think he's really here. In fact, he's giving a paper here, right? One of the papers is by Jean-François Mertens, a joint paper with somebody, I've forgotten who it is, but one of the papers. Huh? Gosner, okay.
So he's presenting more than one.
We had this very good picture on the wait a minute. What is? How do we get rid of this? איך מתפטרים מזה?
Okay, escape.
Escape, okay. So, I've known Jean-François for 68, about 45 years. 45 years. And so in a sense, he's really, like I read over here, I feel about him as my Jean-François. In a sense, he's a student. Because he didn't do his PhD with me, but I'll tell afterwards a little bit about the relationship, the scientific relationship, and also the personal relationship between Jean-François and me. I'd like to comment on two lines in this slide. One is that I call it Mertens Festival, not the Mertens Memorial, okay? It's a festival. I have had the misfortune of losing 4 loved people in my life, and we have in our tradition, there's a week of mourning when you sit at home and people come to visit you, and very often it's thought of as a sad affair, and all kinds of tricks are used to make it as short as possible. But in my case, I always saw it as a festival, as a celebration of the person's life, the person who passed away, a celebration of his life. So I think of this gathering as a celebration of the life of Jean-François. So it's a festival, it's not a memorial. And the second, item that I want to emphasize over here is the word my, which I put in italic. And this has a very vivid personal meaning, but it also describes the lecture. Jean-François has a huge mathematical and game theoretic legacy. It's enormous. And I have to admit that I know about only a small part of it. Okay? So, and I think it's a significant part, but maybe it's not the most important part. So what I'm going to present over here is what stayed in my head, what I know about Jean-François, what I know about his oeuvre, and other people, may know other things. And I think this conference, which will present follow-up to his work, I think will illuminate other parts of his contributions to science. This jumped by itself, but I'd like to give you it's not a menu. Yes, it's a, you go into restaurants and sometimes you can order a steak or you can order a piece of fish or whatever it is. But sometimes they say, we'd like to give you a tasting menu. Okay, so you get a little bit of each. So this is what I'm going to give you, maybe a little bit of each of some of Jean-François' work. And maybe even, you're not going to be able to eat it at all. You're only going to be able to see it. I'll let you, tasting menu, or maybe perhaps better would be a looking menu, and we'll go over fast some of the things. So some personal vignettes. I think because I don't have very much time, I'm going to skip over this for another occasion during the coming few days. And we have 4 items really that I'd like to go into in a little, just serve them on the table so that you can look at them. I don't know whether you'll be able to taste them. There won't be time, maybe. It's like the waiter bringing the stuff, bringing the plate, and then you pick up your fork and then he comes and whisks it away. There's something like that. Repeated games with incomplete information, and that's my first contact with Jean-François. I remember driving along one of the Belgian roads and telling him about this, and he caught on amazingly fast. I mean, really amazingly fast. And within 5 minutes, I explained to him the whole theory of repeated games with incomplete information on one side, and he caught on in 5 minutes. Yes, and he went on to the next thing, as we'll see right away. And stochastic games, in which he made very important contributions. Shapley values of non-atomic games, which he to a large extent, after the book by Lloyd and Your Humble Servant, he really shaped this subject. Strategic stability, which is the name of the game in what's it called? Refinement. Sorry, thank you. Another senior moment, and the canonical interactive belief systems there, the Mertens, Zamir stuff. So just very briefly. So some personal vignettes, as I said. If I have time at the end, I'll mention some of them. If not, at some dinner or something like that. Okay. We'll go on to repeated 2-person zero-sum games with incomplete information. Let's, I hope you can see this. I tried to put a lot of material into one slide so that the slide should be before you. Maybe it wasn't such a good idea. Anyway, can this be seen from the last row? Yes, ACDA and the Geneva conferences. This business started in the mid-60s, about 50 years ago. when we were asked, a group of us, including Mike Maschler, Dick Stearns, Gerard de Breu, Herbert Scarf, Jim Maybury, Harold Kuhn, were asked to look at the situation of the arms control and disarmament. This was the height of the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States, and there were these Geneva conferences for trying to bring the arms race under control. And they had them every year or something like that, again and again and again. They had the Geneva conferences, and the question was how many. The question was to try to control the number of nuclear weapons that were being deployed, and one of the things that was typical of this, that I identified this situation, was that the United States did not really know how many nuclear weapons the Soviet Union had, and the Soviet Union didn't know how many nuclear weapons the United States had. So this was a repeated game of incomplete information. It wasn't a zero-sum game, but when you deal with game theory, you start out by saying, well, let's look at the zero-sum case first, and then you, if you can do something with the zero-sum case, then maybe you can do something with the more general cases. But so we started out looking at repeated zero-sum games with incomplete information. Now, this case of the ACDA, the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency of the United States, is a situation with incomplete information on both sides. But starting out with two-person zero-sum games, we said, okay, let's take it one at a time. Let's look at when there is incomplete information on one-sided incomplete information. In other words, we have two players. They're playing a game repeatedly, the same game they play repeatedly. They get to know what the outcome of the game is. So they get to know after each Geneva conference, you know what agreement was decided on. But one side has information that the other side does not have, okay? And this is a theory developed by Mike Maschler, may he rest in peace, and your humble servant, around 1966, maybe 1967, something like that. And as I said, I explained this theory to Jean-François. Now, the result that we obtained was that to the extent that the information is used, you know something, the pictures, the picture taking slightly disturbs me. So take your pictures, I'll wait, and then, אתה מבין עברית, מה? Okay. מה? Huh? Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, you can take before, after, whatever. Okay, I think, thank you very much. Well, you can take with other speakers. Okay, so our basic result was that you can't use the information without eventually revealing it, you know, in a long term. So if you take a certain bargaining stance in the Geneva conferences, then your bargaining stance, what you insist on, reveals how many nuclear weapons you have. Okay, so to the extent that the information is used, it is eventually revealed. If you can reveal all the information immediately, if you want to give it away, if you want to use it and it's worthwhile for you to use it, you can hide it, but then you can't use it, or you can hint at it. You can partially reveal it. But here, this sentence sums it up. And now, technically, what are the results that we got? The infinite stage game. Okay, so if you repeat it infinitely often, we'll talk very soon about what this means, an infinite stage game. There is no such thing as an infinite stage game, right? Wrong. There is such a thing. and we'll talk about what this means. But for the moment, let's just say that the infinite stage game has a value, a minimax value, okay? So, and we call that V infinity. The values of the end stage game, so you take the, you take each stage, you take the payoffs to a game that is repeated exactly n times. You take the payoff to that, you average the payoffs, you call the value of that game Vn, and that converges to a limit. That's what Masha and I showed. And that limit is the value of the infinite stage game. Okay. Now, I explained this, as I said, in 5 minutes, this whole theory, to Jean-François as we were riding in a car somewhere in Belgium near Louvain-la-Vieille. Louvain-la-Vieille, yes. Not Louvain-la-Neuve. Louvain-la-Neuve didn't exist yet. This is the late 60s, okay? 68, 69, something like that, okay?
It took him 5 minutes because he was driving.
That didn't bother him. It didn't bother him. I'll tell some stories about Jean-François driving. It's a miracle he survived so long. So this is, and he together with Shmuel Zamir went on to develop the same game, and now we get really to the two-sided to the situation in the ACDA and the Geneva conferences, because neither side knew how many nuclear weapons the other side had. And now, what was found in that situation? First of all, the infinite stage game need not have a value, and that was even before Jean-François came on the scene. This is a result which was obtained by your humble servant and Mike Mashler and Dick Stearns, who later went on to win the Turing Prize in computer science. The infinite stage game need not have a value. And the reason is that when you have infinitely many stages, each side waits for the other. Okay, we said before that you can't, to the extent that the information is used, it is eventually revealed. But each side waits for the other to use his information, so reveal. And so they're waiting, and never anything happens. And if one side breaks down and suddenly uses information, you get the max min, and if the other side waits, then you get the min max, and they are different, okay? So whichever side uses its information first loses out. And that's why you get a lack of value, get no value in that situation. Now, the question arose, does the limit of Vn exist? You see, before we said the limit of the Vn's converge, and the limit is the value of the infinite. Here, there is no value of the infinite stage game. So maybe the end stage game does not have a limit, and Mike and I and Dick Stearns thought, and we couldn't solve this problem. See, because that's different. Over there, each side cannot wait for the other side, because you have to stop at n. You can't wait for the other side to reveal its information, because the game has a given finite duration, okay? So Vn certainly exists. And what about the limit of that? And the answer is yes. And the answer is Mertens Zamir was given in 1972. The limit does indeed exist. Now, I put Mertens 71. No, it was published in 72. I have news for you. Okay. Yes.
The first issue of the first volume of
Maybe, all right, I stand corrected, but meet me outside afterwards. Okay. Okay, so that's the end, and I apologize for not putting Zamir in red over here, but there's certainly authors of absolutely equal standing in this. But you know, this is the Mertens Festival, and I hope we're not going to put Zamir in red in the near future. Okay. And that's going to be the rule throughout this talk. All right. Now, the partial reason is, since the horizon is finite, there's no time to wait, as I said. But that still doesn't mean that there is a limit, but there is indeed a limit. With discounting, if you don't have a finite, horizon, not finitely, but the future gets less and less important as you go. So there's also, in a sense, there is a finite duration, and you also get the same limit when the discount rate tends to 0. Now, Jean-François made a lot of other very deep contributions to repeated game theory, but you know, here's, I put the plate on the table, and the waiter, I'm going to whisk it away now. You can't eat more than what you've already eaten of his contribution. He's absolutely a giant. I mean, every field that he touched, he in a sense formed the field. He made major contributions to it. He's really, you know, I don't want to make comparisons, but absolutely a giant in mathematical game theory. That was his field. Okay. Next, we come to stochastic games. Now, a stochastic game is like a repeated game. Okay, you play a game again and again. But the underlying stage game, the game that you repeat, may change from period to period, depending on what the players have done at previous stages. Current actions determine not only current payoffs, but also future opportunities. What you do now determines, it could be stochastically, probabilistically, but it goes far to determining what game you play in the future. Okay, that's a stochastic game. Shapley, 1953, formulated stochastic two-person zero-sum games and showed that the value of the discounted game exists for fixed delta, and indicated how to calculate it. He wrote down a functional equation for the value of the discounted stochastic game for fixed delta. Now, but what happens now when the discount goes to 0? Yes, what happens to the average payoff when the discount goes to 0? And this was a problem that stayed open for a very long time. And then Bewley and Kohlberg, in 1976, I hope that's the right date, showed, anyway, that's the publication date that I have for this, showed that the limit, just like the limit of V delta exists when you're talking about repeated games of incomplete information, they showed that the limit of V delta and the limit of Vn exist and are equal, but they did not show that V infinity exists. The Bewley-Kohlberg paper is a marvel deep mathematical insights, uses the theory of functions of a complex variable to prove something in game theory, is really beautiful. But they did not succeed in showing that V infinity exists. And again, I'm going to talk very shortly about what this V infinity is. What are we talking about? So V infinity is actually a very important item. In some sense, more important than a limit of Vn. So finally, Mertens and Neyman proved that V infinity does indeed exist and equals the limit of the Vn. And this is a two-person zero-sum case. Using the methods of Shapley and Bewley-Kohlberg, Mertens subsequently showed that non-zero sum delta discounted stochastic games do have equilibria in stationary strategies whose payoffs converge as delta as the discount rate goes to 0. As a stationary strategy is a strategy which, given the same situation, when players are faced with the same situation as you go through the infinite, or the sequence of plays, given the same situation, a player will behave in the same way. Okay, that's what stationary means. It doesn't, you can't have stationary strategies in a finite stage game because the stage where you are, how many stages you've already played, how many are to the end of the game, does play an important role. So if you are given, you can't be given the same situation, you can put it that way. But the situation differs if according to the stage number. But in a discounted game, that is not the case. But unlike in the zero-sum case, the limit need not correspond to an equilibrium in the undiscounted game. So in a sense, you do not have the analog of V infinity equals the limit of Vn. So the underlying central theorem in this area is the fourth bullet, Mertens and Neyman, V infinity exists. Let me just say something about the significance of these terms, V infinity, lim Vn, and lim V delta. Okay, you didn't give me the 30-minute flash. You didn't flash the 30 minutes, but okay, fine. All right. We won't argue. So optimal strategies in the infinite stage game are approximately optimal in each sufficiently long finite stage game. So when you say that V infinity exists, what you're saying is play optimally in V infinity and don't pay too much attention to how long the game is. As long as it's really long, you're going to be near optimal, okay? So it doesn't really have to be an infinite stage game. That's what this is. So if a player knows that the game is long, but he doesn't know how long, then he should play to get V infinity. Optimal strategies in the end stage game depend crucially on n, okay? So you have to know how long it is. So in the delta discounted game, it's like the end stage game in that its effective duration is finite when you look and when you discount, when you think of the discount as a stopping probability, then you have an expected finite time. But it's unlike the end stage game in that, in two ways. First of all, it admits stationary strategies, which in the end stage game, like I said, you don't. And it rules out pathological end effects. Like in the, n times repeated prisoner's dilemma, you have to move, for an equilibrium, you have to move selfishly double cross, what is called double cross in the last stage, and then you work your way backwards. And this is not really, it's an end effect, and that you don't have in the thing. Now we have Shapley values of non-atomic games, and this is a very important subject to which Jean-François made tremendous contributions. I mean, to a large extent, he in fact formed this area. Well, I have to admit that Shapley and your humble servant also had something to do with it, but after the book of Shapley and me, Jean-François really shaped this area. But I have only 13 minutes, and I think this being more technical than the other areas, I'm going to skip this for the time being and get back to it perhaps later. Okay? Just gaze at this for the moment. We put it on the plate, and now the waiter takes it away. Okay? Now we have strategic stability, which is the creation of Elon Kohlberg and Jean-François. So Kohlberg and Mertens call a Nash equilibrium of a strategic game strategically stable. So a Nash equilibrium sigma of a strategic game G, they call it strategically stable if, roughly speaking, there are a number of caveats in here which I'm not going to get into, okay? Every game close to G has an equilibrium. Every game close, not some games, but every game close to G has an equilibrium close to sigma, okay? And they prove, again, roughly speaking, that every game has a strategically stable equilibrium. And to do so, they first show that for a given game size, the graph of the equilibrium correspondence, when compactified with a point at infinity, is homeomorphic to the sphere of games when similarly compactified. Okay, let's not worry about the compactification at this moment. Just think of the space of all you think of games of a given size. Think of a game of a given size, let's say 6 by 18 matrix. It has 3 players. So in the 6 by 18 matrix, you have 3 players. How much is 6 times 18? I took too large a number. 30 times 20 matrix. Yes, I'm no good at math. So we have a matrix with 600 entries, 3 players, 1,800. The space of such games is Euclidean space of dimension 1,800. Okay, and now the equilibria in this space. The equilibria in this space are also something. They are something in 1,800 space, because you have to give in a mixed strategy. You have to give a probability. No, they are something in 20. I don't know what it is. Whatever it is, it's some space. You have mixed strategies of player 1, of player 2, player 3. Okay, and you have strategies. You have equilibria of this, and we know that many games can have multiple equilibria. So now what happens here? Escape? Okay, fine. Okay. Oh, I see, I turned it. So what we have over here is, let's say, the space of games. This is the space of games. And now we have a specific game, and this game could have, let's say, 3 equilibria. Okay? Now, what Kohlberg and Mertens did was to look not at a specific game, but at the space of all the games. Okay, so and they showed that in each on top of each game, the set of its equilibria. They showed that when you graph those equilibria, you get something which is homeomorphic to, okay, and maybe then now it goes up again, okay. You get something which is homeomorphic to the original space down below, okay. It's, so to speak, a single line. In this case, it's not a single line, but it's a single 1,800 space or something like that, yes? Now, what do we want? We want that in games close to the original game, like here and here, there should be an equilibrium close to this equilibrium, all right? So we have here, indeed, we have to this equilibrium, we have something close, an equilibrium close. To this equilibrium on top of this game, we have something close. And to this equilibrium, we also have something close, right? So it would seem that all equilibria are stable, but it's not that way. Because look at this one. Okay? Now over here, when you go over here, then indeed we have equilibria close to this equilibrium, and equilibria close to this equilibrium, and equilibria close to this equilibrium. But when you go to the other side, then we have equilibria close to this one, but not equilibria close to this one. There's no equilibrium here. Okay? So this is not stable. And this one is a stable equilibrium. So there's always a stable equilibrium. Yes, that follows from this homeomorphism theorem. Okay? There's always a stable equilibrium. All right. That's the idea of the proof. We can put the thing back. No more blackboard. Okay. Subsequently, Mertens and Mertens-Govinden revised and perfected this definition, and we got homology and cohomology and all the brilliant and the complicated and beautiful ideas of algebraic topology entering into game theory. So here's another area in which Jean-François was instrumental. He really shaped the area. And strategic stability has perhaps become the most widely accepted equilibrium we find. The last item that I want to touch on is the canonical interactive belief spaces. Games of incomplete information a la Hassani. Hassani in the late 60s showed that addressed the problem of games of incomplete information, namely that in game theory up to then, people had assumed that the game is known and that each player knows the payoff functions of the other player. But this obviously is not a viable assumption. So you say, well, I don't know the payoffs of the other player, but I do know, I have some idea of what his payoffs might be. I have some beliefs about it. And then, but it's also important, I realize also that the other player has beliefs about me. So it's important for me to know what those beliefs are, and I don't know what they are, so I have beliefs about the beliefs and so on. We get an infinite regress of beliefs. Now, Hassani devised a way of generating this infinite regress, exactly what the beliefs about the beliefs are, with a theory of types. A type is something which each player has a certain type, and then that type determines what his payoff function is, and it also determines his probability distribution on the other player's types. And just when you get there, so you can think of a finite number of types for each player, 2 or 3 or 4, yeah. And when you have this, and when you specify the type and what each type thinks about the other person's types, then you get this generates the whole infinite regress of beliefs, and beliefs about beliefs, and beliefs about beliefs about beliefs, and so on. And the question was open for a very long time whether any coherent system of beliefs about beliefs, infinite system of beliefs about beliefs, could be generated by a type structure of the type that Hassani had envisioned. And this question was open for a very long time, and eventually this was this remains to this day a paper of a result of great importance. So the question is, can any coherent infinite regress of beliefs be generated by appropriate type spaces? What do I mean by coherent? By coherent, I mean that the second, third order beliefs must generate the first order beliefs. You can't have the beliefs contradicting each other. But if the beliefs are coherent in some such sense, can they be generated by appropriate type spaces? And the answer is yes. This was proved by an article by Mertens Zamir. And again, I wish. Okay. You agree? You agree? Okay. And I always end my lectures when I am abroad. I end them by writing thank you in the language of the country where I am. So I just came back from Russia a couple of weeks ago, and I wrote Spasibo in the Cyrillic alphabet on the screen. And then I went to Kazakhstan and I wrote Rahmet on the screen. So here I say Toda, thank you.
Any questions? Something was not clear? Okay, so thank you, Israel. And you didn't expect any questions.
It's all clear, crystal clear, like Frank Hahn used to say. Yeah.
Okay, so the next stop, François. Okay.
So.
Okay.
You think I need that?
Yeah, it's for the live. Put it in a pocket.
Okay.
And put it in the dash. Okay, what is in the slide?
Where should I put it? Please do it, because I see. Thank you very much.
This is one?
So how do I move? It's written Jerusalem slides.
This one.
Let me put my glasses if you want.
This one?
Yes, it's
It's a roll if you want. If you want, there is.
Yeah, is there a pointer?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Good luck.
Yes.
So 45 minutes, yes?
Yes. Okay. So
That's the lights. Okay, Françoise, please.
thank you very much. So Bob did a wonderful introduction, of course, to this talk. I'm going to focus on the first class of games he described. I call them Bayesian repeated games instead of repeated games with incomplete information, just to insist on beliefs. And you'll see later on why it's important to take this parameter into account. But this is just a name, of course, and the games are really the same ones as the ones Bob told us about. Of course, this is a very ambitious title, and I certainly will not be able to cover such a topic. Subtitle would be From Mertens Xavier 71, and I mean, I'm not absolutely sure of the date, but of course this is just to mean that I refer to the very same paper. So from Mertens Xavier 71, let's say, to some recent results on non-zero-sum games. So the topic is really to go on from that paper to non-zero-sum games. And I'll give a very, very selective survey. As a matter of fact, there are not so many results. So even if I'm not going to describe everything that's available, clearly there are not so many results. So very selective survey. And then I try to tell you about some work that I'm currently doing with Antoine Salomon, who was a student of Dina Rosenberg and Nicolas Vieille. And I think he's becoming an assistant professor in economics. Before we move to this is a picture that was taken not so far away from here. So there was a conference on repeated games here in Jerusalem in 1985. And we had a trip from that conference. And here you can see Jean-François. He's here. I'm here. And there are very famous and nice people on that picture. You can recognize David Blackwell. And close to him, Thomas Ferguson. And Blackwell and Ferguson are very well known for that wonderful paper, The Big Match. And so they're here. And here you can also recognize Roy Radner, Truman Bewley, and Bob Weber. The picture is very, very bad, but you can trust me about the people. No, Sylvain took the picture. So he's then definitely not on it. This was taken with a very bad camera of mine by Sylvain. And here are two quotations from Jean-François himself. You know about those interviews that are published in Macroeconomic Dynamics. So Sergio interviewed Bob, and Pierre Dehaye interviewed Jacques Dresse, and Jean-François had asked me to interview him. I don't feel so much comfortable with it because we did not complete the interview. So we went for one round, and then we kept postponing completing it. And every time we were talking about it, Jean-François would tell me about his recent research, and there was no way to really go on with the systematic interview. Anyway, I did my best to save some of it, and it's now in press at Macroeconomic Dynamics. So here are two sentences from this interview. First of all, Jean-François refers to this wonderful year he had here in 79, 80. There was a special year in game theory. I had not started myself at that point, but so he says that meeting of game theorists went on for a full year, 1979, 1980, in the Einstein building of the Institute of Advanced Studies. It was a charming old building with a view over the Judean Desert and the old city. It was wonderful. I had an office on the corner with a view on both sides, wonderful. And then I interviewed him about this paper with Shmuel, and that's what he told us about it. It tells us the problem solved with Shmuel Zamir just started with some results of Oman and Maschler, which remained a bit mysterious. They had proved that in infinitely repeated games with lack of information on one side, the value existed. This is just Bob just told us about. The value existed. In the case of lack of information on both sides, they knew the min-max and the max-min, and that these two quantities could be different. Namely, the value could not exist. And so the question was to know how the VNs behaved. Shmuel and I showed that the limit of the VNs, or of discounted values, still existed and was given by an explicit formula. This is the formula that gives rise to what Sylvain Sorin or others call now the Mertens-Zamir operator. And Shmuel will tell you much more about this. So let's be more precise on this, and let's go on with some recent results, as I said, and not so recent one. So the basic model is a two-person Bayesian game, which is described by the following ingredients. We have two players, a finite set of types for every player. Theta is a product set of types. There is a finite set of actions for every player. And we assume that there are as many actions as types. So actions can be used for signaling purposes. And A is a product set of actions. And each player has a utility function, which is just a mapping from types and actions to the real numbers. Another ingredient to the model is a probability distribution over types. And we assume that players have a common prior. To describe the infinitely repeated game, there are two ways of evaluating the payoffs. One is to consider a discount factor. And another way of proceeding is to go directly to the infinitely repeated game. And that is exactly what Bob reminded us just a minute ago. So we have two possible ways of evaluating the payoffs. But in any case, the way in which the game is played is very simple. And it is the same, whatever the way in which we evaluate the payoffs. First of all, there is a virtual stage at which the types are chosen according to the probability distribution Q. And each player is just informed of his own type, theta I. And this is forever. This stage is not played again. So that means that the players just keep this information, and this doesn't change along the game. And then at every stage T, the players simultaneously choose an action, and these choices are publicly revealed right after every stage. So we have full monitoring. So that's very simple structure of the game. So for the payoffs, I don't think I have to remind this to this audience. If you have discounting, you just have a well-defined payoff function for every sequence of actions. You evaluate the payoff with this formula. In the undiscounted game, and again, I don't have to give details given what Bob reminded to us, you just consider limit of arithmetic averages. So you consider limits of means. I will not enter the technical details. So you can consider two sets of equilibrium payoffs. So here, I would like to say a few words on the non-zero sum case. So I go to Nash equilibria. So you can consider the set of Nash equilibrium payoffs of the delta discounted game for a fixed delta. And this set will be non-empty by standard result of Nash equilibrium. And you can also consider the set of Nash equilibrium payoffs of the undiscounted game, going directly to the game with infinitely many stages. And so under complete information, we know the characterization. It's a very, very well-known result, which is referred to as the Folk theorem. And the Folk theorem gives a characterization in the case where there is no problem of information. So both players know exactly the game they are playing. And in that case, these two sets, the set of Nash equilibrium payoffs of the undiscounted game and the limit set of the Nash equilibrium payoffs of the discounted game, these two sets are equal. And they coincide with the set of feasible and individual rational payoffs of gamma, of the initial game. Now, you all know this story that it's a fork theorem because the result was well known and so on. I think it would be better to refer to this as a result by Bob Oman and Lloyd Shapley in '76. But at least the result is well known, and this is the benchmark in the case of complete information. Now, we would like to say something in the case where there is private information, there is incomplete information, and here, this is just a reminder of what was told to us by Bob Oman a second ago. Now, when both players have private information, in the zero-sum case, so now I take another extreme, I consider private information, but zero-sum payoffs. This is okay for non-zero-sum game, but here I focus on zero-sum payoffs, and then we know that in that case, the set of Nash-Jacobian payoffs can be empty. The infinite game may have no value. So that was shown, as we just heard, by Oman and Maschler and Stearns in 1967. And we can also consider the value of the discounted game. This exists. And the result of Mertens and Zamir in '71 is that the limit of these values of the discounted game exist. No, my parameterization is not exactly the same as Bob wants. So for me, delta would be a way to evaluate the patience of the players in such a way that delta goes to 1 at the limit. But of course, it's exactly the same thing. So the limit exists and is characterized as the solution of a pair of functional equations. So it's not only an existence theorem, but it's a very nice characterization. And I'm sure Shmuel will tell us more about this result. So now, what happens when both players have private information? So I'm not going to tell you anything on the case of lack of information on one side. That is a very important case. There are a number of papers about that case. But here I really want to focus on the case where both players have private information. And that was Mertens-Zamir '71 was about. So both players have private information and non-zero sum. So that's really a case that is of interest for many economic applications, for instance. And this is really too hard to go on. We know from the case of lack of information on one side that correlation can be really difficult. So now we're going to make two strong assumptions on the one-shot game. One is well known, and it's private values or non-owned payoffs. So that means that the players know their own payoffs. They have private information, but they know their own payoff. That means that the uncertainty they have is not on some parameter that is relevant for the economy, but it's really information on their own preferences. So for instance, they are members of a duopoly and they know their own cost function, or they are playing an auction and they know the value of the object for themselves, and so on. It's a very popular assumption. It's a very restrictive assumption too. Now I made a new assumption, which it's not necessary at all in an audience like this one, but it may really help people who are not so familiar with repeated games. I assume that there are, which I call uniform punishment strategies. That means that a player can punish the other one in a one-shot game as well as if he knew his type, even if he doesn't know the type. You don't need to know the preferences of your opponent to punish him if needed. So that means that if you consider the min-max of the true game for player I, when his type is theta I, you consider this, which is a well-defined value. It's the individual rationality level of player I, but it's exposed because it's given his own type. If you consider this quantity, there is a strategy of the other player that enables him to reach that level, even if he doesn't know theta I. The strategy of player J is independent of the type of player I. That's a strong assumption, but it would be satisfied in many applications. So for instance, in a duopoly, you produce a lot. In a corner duopoly, you produce a lot, and you are sure to make the profit down, whatever the cost function of the other. So what does this give to us? First of all, there is a characterization of Nash equilibrium payoffs in gamma infinity in the game without discounting. And this was, in fact, proposed by Gilad Koren in the late 80s. I think the paper was written here as a master's thesis. Sorry, Tel Aviv, under the supervision of Sergiu, but in Tel Aviv. Sergiu was still in Tel Aviv at the time. So I think in 88 or something, but then Gilad wrote a more complete discussion paper at the Current Institute in 92. He did not publish the paper. It's really a pity. And so this statement is just a simplification of this in the case where we have these uniform punishments. And this helps to make the statement much simpler. But it's the same idea. So the statement is that the Nash equilibrium payoffs of this undiscounted game are necessarily achieved as separating, which means completely revealing equilibrium payoffs of the game. So it's a very strong statement. It says that if you have to be a Nash equilibrium payoff, you have to be completely revealing. It's a very strong statement. And with these uniform punishment, we can just describe these solutions by inequalities are not completely linear because I have a maxi, but these are very simple inequalities. And these inequalities are about the one-shot game, which is not the case in the original characterization, but that's the same idea. So how is an equilibrium described? The players, and all the equilibrium payoffs can be reached in this way, the players just tell each other their types at the very first stage of the game. They tell each other everything. And given what they have told to each other, the type that they have revealed, they pick a scenario, a frequency of moves, something to be played. It's a non-revealing equilibrium, if you like, that is chosen as a function of what they have told to each other. So now, if you consider the payoff of player I, if he reveals his type correctly, if he tells the truth, what he gets when he's of type theta I is that equilibrium, non-revealing equilibrium, that frequency of move that was chosen as a function of the types. But because he evaluates his payoff before the beginning of the game, he has to take expectations over the types of the other player. Now, what can player do? In which way can player I deviate from that? Well, he can lie about his type. It's not clear that he wants to tell the truth in such a circumstance, but also he might deviate from this prescribed scenario, as we know from the fork term, exactly as under complete information. Given that distribution that is given, he might as well not follow it. So what happens when he contemplates the possibility of cheating, of not telling the truth, he contemplates the possibility of telling type Ri, while his true type is theta I. And what can happen? He can, when he gets to know the type of the other player, player J, he can either continue to mimic the other type, in which case he will have, for his true type theta I, the payoff he would have gotten by mimicking, but the distribution is chosen for the type he reported, while the true payoff depends, of course, on the true type. And he can also deviate to anything else, in which case he will be punished. But here, punishment is very easy because we have uniform punishment. So this is an inequality that we can write in the one-shot game. And it's very simple to check whether we have equilibria or not in given this characterization. And because of this simplicity, this result also holds when we have more than two players. So as in the fork theorem, the characterization shows that the Nash equilibrium payoffs can be viewed as cooperative solutions of the one-shot game. Everything was written in the one-shot game. You can see that as a contract. And of course, the trick is that because we have uniform punishments, we don't have to use Blackwell's approachability, which is a beautiful tool, but here it's just not necessary because we have a strong assumption. And we can also show that we have a partial fork theorem in the sense that the solutions are feasible, incentive compatible, and individually rational in the usual sense, in the inter-instance, in the one-shot game. So this is a kind of and we can show that the set of Nash equilibrium payoffs of the one-shot game is included in an appropriate set, standard set of solutions, cooperative solutions of the one-shot game. And this set, for instance, was well defined by Meyerson in his textbook. So there is a real relationship between the two. But we don't have the reverse. Why? But in particular, because the set of Nash equilibrium payoffs of the infinitely undiscounted game may be empty. This was shown by Corinth, for instance. We already knew it in the zero-sum case, but here we have a completely different case because we have private values. But we have that this set can be empty, so of course it cannot be equal to the set of cooperative solution of the one-shot game, which is always on empty because it contains the Nash equilibrium payoffs of the one-shot game. And this inclusion also holds with the discount factor. So that is what was known in the early 90s. And somehow this result, I'm afraid, was not received with the deserved merit, because in this community it was considered, I mean, that's how I interpreted it myself, it was considered as a kind of very particular and trivial case. And anyway, Gilad Corinth went to something else, to computer science and so on, and so I did all I could, but at the time I couldn't do much to convince him to publish the paper. The paper was not published, and I think we just forgot about it for a long time. Anyway, very recently, some people took over from a different perspective, I understand, and so there is a characterization of the Nash equilibrium payoffs in the discounted game when delta goes to the limit by Marcin Pesky. And so he uses a very, very strong assumption. So it's not so easy to make the connection between this result and the one we just saw, but because he makes an extremely strong assumption, which is that there exists belief-free equilibria in the repeated game. Belief-free equilibria were introduced in some papers on repeated games with imperfect monitoring, but then they were also considered in the family of games I'm currently describing. And there is a paper by Horner and Lovo where they use belief-free equilibria in this model, and they characterize these belief-free equilibria. Now, these are very, very specific, very special solutions, because it's in the definition of these solutions that they should not depend on the beliefs. So for those who have worked on the basic model, the one that was developed by Bob Oman and Michael Maschler, and the one that was used by Shmuel and Jean-François, it seems extremely strange that you can have equilibria that would not depend on the beliefs, because they are everywhere. Everywhere in the statement, we have V infinity of P, the concavification of U of P. We have these beliefs everywhere. So that there might be solutions that do not depend on the beliefs looks like something really incredible. Anyway, it turns out that in games, with non-zero-sum games, with lack of information on one side, there are many, I mean, all equilibria basically are belief-free. So it's a strange assumption, but anyway, it may also be fulfilled in some classes of games. Under this very strong assumption, and of course, if you have that assumption, you have existence, because you assume at the outset that there is a solution. And to relate it to what we saw previously, it implies it is stronger than assuming that the intersection of the set of Nash equilibrium payoffs of the undiscounted game for all Qs, intersection over the beliefs, is non-empty. So this is to assume that the characterization I showed before holds, that there is a solution to this system of inequalities for all Q. There are solutions that would be the same equilibrium payoffs for all Qs. So it's very strong assumption. But if you have that, then it's not the end of the story. And that's what Marcin Pesky shows. He shows that if we have this, then the limit, when the discount factor makes the players infinitely patient of the set of Nash equilibrium payoffs in the undiscounted game, this coincides with a well-behaved set that is the set of all finitely revealing equilibria. These equilibria that just require finitely many stages of revelation. So there are two things, if you like. First of all, it shows that you have more solution when you go to the limit. This is something that cannot happen in the zero-sum case. When everything goes well, in the zero-sum case, you have an equality. Here, he shows that in some very specific context, you get more solution, many more equilibria, when you consider the limit when the discount factor goes to 1. So this set is much larger than the other. And you don't have the pathologic example of Sylvain Sorin for the stochastic games, the one you referred before, that you may have very different sets. Here you have an inclusion between the two sets. But this set can be much larger. Here's an example where this set is much larger, and this set is well-behaved. It's well-behaved, finitely revealing equilibria. So now that there remains an open question, we did not make much progress since Gilad Cohen's paper, because there is a very hard question, I think, that is still open. What happens to the limit of the set of Nash equilibrium payoffs with discounting when the set of solutions without discounting, the undiscounted game, is empty, and is empty for some belief Q. So in other words, can we hope to generalize the paper of Mertens and Zamy in 71 to such non-zero-sum games? And this is still open, because this of course, doesn't solve this issue. What we are currently doing in order to try to understand what's going on is to solve an example, which is a public good game. It's very close to a reputation model, but it's also quite different in some respects. So when both players are normal, so both players have two types. Either they are normal or they are greedy. And if they are both normal, they play a kind of chicken game, and they value the public good more than the private good. So they can both contribute, in which case, I should have said that it's enough that one of the players contributes to produce a public good. So if they both contribute, they both get the public good, and they both get 1. If player 1 contributes and player 2 does not, player 1 gets the public good. Sorry, the one who contributes, yes, just gets the public good. And the one who does not contribute gets both. So he gets the public good and the private good. If none of them contributes, they just have the private good, which is less values if they are normal. But if a player is greedy, then he values the private good much more than the public one. So what happens is that in the one-shot game, he has a dominant strategy consisting of not contributing. And this explains all the payoffs you have here. You have a symmetric case where here it's player 2 that is greedy and player 1 that is normal, and here they are both greedy. So it's very similar to reputation model, or at least this is the kind of model where you would think that players will try to build a reputation. So what happens if you are normal? You would like to have the public good, of course. You are interested in it. But if you can get it by free riding, that's the best, right? So what you would like to do is to not contributing and just get the public good thanks to the other. I won't need so much, in fact. So you're right to tell me, because then I can really slow down. Thank you. So this is really the kind of model where players would like to build a reputation. Because if you are normal and you play the game repeatedly, if there is some doubt on the type, if player 1 is normal, but he believes that player 2 might believe that he is greedy, then he might do everything he can to make player 2 believe that he really is greedy, so that player 2 will feel like contributing. So So this is really a model where you would think that if the players repeat the game, they will try to build a reputation and make the other player believe that they are greedy. So in particular, if you assume that this probability is 0, that player 2 is normal with probability 1, that's exactly what happens. Player 1 manages in convincing player 2 that he's greedy. He mimics the greedy type. He behaves as if he were greedy. That means he never contributes. Player 2 believes that, and as a result, the equilibrium that is implemented is that player 1 does not contribute and player 2 does contribute, which means that player 1 makes a beautiful payoff, much more than he would get in the game without uncertainty. So this is the kind of game where suing the doubt makes a player better off, and this was extremely well explained by another of your students, Sergio, by Eitan Israeli, who at least published a paper, and he shows that there is an optimal way of sowing the doubt. So the way in which you design the game that happens when the player is greedy, the best to get the best bound would be to make the other believe that you are really his opponent, that you are playing a zero-sum game against him. But here, the idea is not to construct artificially a game that would be played to build a reputation. Here, the idea is that the game is given. So that's the real difference between these models of infinitely repeated games with incomplete information, between these games and models that are really built for reputation. In reputation models, you just have a game with complete information, and you construct an ad hoc game that would be the one that is appropriate to get the best reputation, the one that, in this example, would lead you to that payoff, which is higher for the players who manages to have a reputation. So we have this game, and the idea is to try to understand everything on it. So a first aspect is that if the players don't discount the future, if they go directly to the infinite game with limits of means, then from the previous result, from Coren's result, combined with this uniform punishment, we know that the solutions are extremely simple and that there is no way to build any reputation. Why? Because we know that all equilibrium payoffs are completely revealing. That means that at the very first stage, you reveal your time. And if you don't, the payoff you get can equivalently be achieved with a perfect relation at the first stage. So there is no way to escape, no way to build a reputation if there is no discounting. The uniform punishment is satisfied here because to punish somebody, it's enough not to contribute. You just don't contribute. So in this game, player 1 can guarantee 1 by contributing. So this depends on his type. And when he's normal, he can guarantee 1 by not contributing, and the opponent can guarantee that he does not get more by not contributing, because omega is smaller than 1. When player 1 is greedy, the best is not to contribute. It's D. It's don't contribute, in which case guarantees Z. But to punish him, the strategy is the same. Player 2, again, does not contribute. So that means that we have uniform punishment, and we can really apply the characterization I showed you before. And what happens in this game, when, let me go to the bottom first, for many beliefs, when the value Z of the private good for each greedy player is sufficiently high, and if the players can be greedy with sufficiently small probability, so that means that they are normal with a large probability, then, so it's 1 minus p here, sorry, it's 1 minus p. So if they are normal with large probability, which is exactly the case you are interested in when you try to build a reputation, then we have no equilibrium payoffs. So if you use that characterization I just showed you with the inequalities that are very simple, so this is relatively easy to check in the game. This is well behaved. If you use these inequalities to characterize the set of Nash equilibrium payoff in the simple game that is here, what you get is that there are many values of the beliefs for which it is empty. In other words, it's also clear that there are no belief-free equilibria in this example. So the game has some features with two-sided reputation models. There are very few papers on that topic, but there is a very recent one by Atakan and Ekmeksi that was just published in JET. But the results, the final result I'm going to show you in a second, are very similar, but the model is still quite different in the sense that they use continuous time, which is fine, but we are interested in going on with the traditional model that was started by Bob Oman and Michael Marshall. So we stick to discrete time, and it makes our life a bit complicated here. So that's a very specific feature of our model. And also here, the greedy type, that's what I told you before, that the model is not really ad hoc when the type is greedy. So the greedy type does not have a dominant strategy in the repeated game when he faces a normal type. And we can also slightly modify the game, and so that this is also true when both players are greedy. In our model, when both players are greedy, even in the repeated game, there is only one equilibrium, but we can change the payoff a little. So that under complete information, the set of Nash equilibrium payoffs has a non-empty interior. Otherwise, in this game and that one, the equilibrium set looks like this. So we have more than the case where the greedy players just plays his dominant strategy in the one-shot game. When the game is repeated, we have many more solutions. And that's a difference with respect to these reputation models. So what they show is that they have a unique equilibrium when the discount factor goes to 1. I suspect that this is not the case here, but we managed in constructing, of course this is just an example, but we managed in constructing a family of equilibria, of equilibrium payoffs for every discount factor that converges as the discount factor goes to 1. So that means that we build explicitly a payoff, we construct by hand a payoff that is in the limit of the sets. So it shows that the limit set is not empty. And how does this payoff look like? So the normal player will just get his min-max. He cannot make anything out of the incomplete information. But the one, that is more likely to be normal doesn't make anything, so he cannot build any reputation. The one that is more likely to be greedy may get, depending on these probabilities, may get a little more. So, and if P2 goes to 0, so that means that you are back to lack of information on one side, you recover that this payoff is 1 plus omega. So that means that the normal player that is sufficiently likely to be, when P1 is 1, so when the normal player, the one that is more likely to be normal, is definitely normal, that means that the normal player that is not completely likely to be normal makes a heavy profit, a nice profit of it. He gets 1 plus omega. That means the higher payoff. I'm finished. This is the last slide. So that means that we have that sequence of payoff of the discounted games that converges very nicely. So in the as the discount factor goes to 1. We recover the well-known result when we have a lack of information on one side. And how does the equilibrium look like? What happens there, so this is with discount factor, what happens there is that the players slowly reveal their types to each other in a war of attrition. So they just, so the whole point is to know when a player is going to contribute. So they start basically by not contributing. But if you really face, if you are normal type and you really face a greedy one, you should switch at some point, because you cannot keep not cooperating for the infinity many stages, because then you get less. Because the greedy type, he's going to stick to this strong strategy. So, so they take time to reveal their type to each other, but at some point they have to give up. And so that's what happens for a fixed discount factor that is sufficiently large. You have a long period of war of attrition, but then you switch to a completely revealing equilibrium. And what discounting does for you in that case, what it does for us, is that it makes this long revelation costly, so it allows to have this revelation of information to take time. While without discounting, it's not possible. Anything you can do with finite limited stages, you can also do in one stage. So this collapses. Because it collapses, both players have to do it at the same time. We recover what Bob was explaining to us before. And so there is no way of settling this down. With a discount factor, you have a cost to do it, and you manage in having this slow revelation of information. That's not the end of the story, because that might be done in a kind of not systematic way, and the payoff might not converge. But here, you immediately realize that these equilibria are similar. They have the same pattern for each delta. So it's not so surprising that because they have the same pattern, they would also converge to something that is well behaved. So in this public good game, we have that for many beliefs, for all beliefs, I think this is too much. I mean, for a large set of beliefs, you have that the set of payoffs of the Nash, the Nash equilibrium payoffs of the undiscounted game is empty. But nevertheless, when you take the limit with discounting, you get a non-empty set. And this is exactly an analog. I mean, of course, it's just one payoff. We have no description of the full set, but it's an analog in an example of the result of Jean-François and Shmuel for zero-sum games. Yes, okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions before we take a break? Jean.
Your class of game. So they are using 12 set of Nash equilibrium of the infinite game is a subset of the unit set of delta equilibrium payoffs.
It was not proved, but I believe this is true. It is proved in the case of lack of info in a particular class. So in this sense, it also holds. It should also hold here. But so it's a reasonable conjecture. I think it really makes sense, and it was proved in a particular case.
One question: more players, three players. Paper by Jean-François Mertens shows that int may be larger, but not for generic payoffs. Makes sense for large generic payoffs?
I believe that the problems we had with the complete information would come back here, but in the papers with in the papers which deal with this this game, usually they start by assuming that the interior, as I had in this picture, usually this is by assumption. You assume that for all possible complete information games that happens for the different states, you have an empty interior. So somehow you make assumptions on the one-shot games that would avoid this problem. I believe so. We did not really think of this, but I believe that's the reasonable answer to give. No. I had a long discussion with Marcin Pesky, and he seemed to say that this kind of assumption was crucial, even in his paper. It might be that it is for the when he shows that all equilibria are finitely revealing, I can see that this assumption is important. So that's why we have a variant of the example where this assumption is also true. But for everything I said, I mean, everything that is specific to our example, or to occurrence, characterization, and so on, as far as I could check, it doesn't matter. Even for n players, I mean, if you consider this characterization with n players, you don't need any further assumption, because these conditions are so strong that they seem to cover everything you need. Yes. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Thank you. I think there is coffee or something. Is there? Okay. So, back at 11:30.
Thank you. Thank you. So
Thank you.